tend to think of political ideology as something that is strictly sociological, born out of environmental and societal pressures. But recent neurological research suggests that many of our political responses may be built into the very neurological pathways which make up our nervous system. These political affiliations are components of personality.
Personality is something that shapes our world. Each person has a unique view of the world that is comprised of various ideologies about how people should behave and what should be acceptable. Personality and differences between people exist because of differences in brain wiring and chemistry.
One current theory concludes that personality is influenced by the sizes and interactions of different structures in the brain.
A study by the University of Minnesota found that there are 5 main aspects of personality: consciousness, extroversion, neuroticism, agreeableness, and openness/intellect, each correlating with a specific structure or region in the brain. One aspect, neuroticism, is very influential in forming political ideology. When people are forming their opinions about social issues such as immigration, welfare, or gay marriage, their fear responses decide how comfortable people are with change and different types of people.
Using fMRI technology, which is a type of imaging that uses MRIs to detect changes in blood flow in the brain, researchers at the Child Mind Institute in New York found that neuroticism was correlated to the areas in the brain that control self-evaluation and fear response. Therefore, people with more neurotic personalities might have different political ideologies than those with less neurotic personalities.
Let's take a look at some research done around perceived threat responses. We're interested in this brain research in particular because threat response produces a reasonably well-mapped, understood pathway in the central nervous system. Before discussing how conservatives and liberals varied in these threat tests, let's examine the physiological processes linked to threat response in humans.
Abrupt threat responses trigger almost immediate defensive cascades of linked rapid extensor flexor movement throughout the body. At the same time, at a slightly slower pace, perceived threat causes signals from the sensory cortex to move through the thalamus and onto the brainstem.
In the amygdala, located slightly below the thalamus, the production of acetylcholine stimulates a release of epinephrine, which in turn leads to activation of the sympathetic nervous system, also known colloquially as the fight or flight response.
In a 2007 study of randomly selected individuals from Lincoln, Nebraska, 46 individuals were brought into the lab, first for a series of surveys which gauged support for socially protective policies. These are policies historically supported by political conservatives.
Second, subjects were tested for skin conductance in response to threats and non-threats. Each individual in the study was hooked up to a skin conductor, then shown 3 disturbing and non-disturbing images on a projector. The data on threatening stimuli showed a significant positive correlation between support for protective social policies, again those historically favored by ideological conservatives, and higher skin conductance levels.
This is a strong correlation, but the research doesn't necessarily conclude neurological causal processes are at work. This is important to note because the study's conclusion only speculates that variances in physiological response to threat may derive from neural activity patterns surrounding the amygdala.
Let's go back and look at some structures in the brain which affect personality and more specifically political ideology. The right amygdala is located in the temporal lobe of the brain and is associated with fear and pleasure responses in humans. This part of the brain tends to be larger in conservatives.
Let's take a look at another structure in the brain, which we haven't mentioned, the anterior cingulate cortex. It's located towards the front of the corpus callosum and is associated with detection of conflicts and emotional regulation. This region of the brain has been reported to have greater activity in ideologically liberal individuals.
As you might be able to tell, personality is not controlled by any one section of the brain, but instead comes from a combination of neurological structural processes and responses to one's environment, often in the processing of threats. While there is more research to be done in this field, it's clear that neurologists are making considerable ground in quantifying how our brain chemistry makes us, us, and how it affects our political views. Thanks for watching.